thank you to everyone who has participated today, whether you've been with us in the audience, participating in discussions, whether you've been a speaker, whether you've joined us on the live stream. This has been, I think, an incredibly interesting and important day. And we will round you out briefly, but I do think it's worthwhile trying to draw together some key themes if we can after such a busy day. And I'm delighted to be joined in that endeavor by our board chair, Dr. Dan Karlin, who's also the CMO at MindMed. So Dan, if you want to give a little bit more of a detailed self-introduction, and then I'm really curious for your thoughts on today.
Yeah, hey everybody. Dan Karlin. I'm a psychiatrist, an addictionologist, and a clinical implementation. So I've worked, I'm not sure it would help even if it were closer. How about now? Oh, you missed the good part. Psychiatrist, addiction doc, clinical informatician. So I've kind of worked on all sides of the current healthcare system. Started clinics, had value-based payment contracts for addiction services more than a decade ago. It's totally doable. You just have to want to do it. Currently, though, I'm developing LSD as a treatment for GAD and MDD. So we use a lot of three-letter acronyms in pharmaceutical development. So what's the acid guy going to say that has any relevance to this conversation today? I think what I want to talk about is what I heard as the through line today, which is the intersection between science, which is fundamentally about building models to help us understand the world through measurement, technology, which are things that enable us to be active in the world, and policy, which are the choices we make about who and how we want to be as people. There's a technology that's particularly relevant to the drug that I'm developing, and you're going to have to stick with me for a second for this one. This gets a little psychiatric. By the way, psychiatry is a fine word. We don't have to call it behavioral health. Do you think of yourself as a collection of behaviors? No, you have this rich internal life, but we reduce people who try to seek care for their rich internal life to behavior. That's weird, and it's because we're really, really scared of broken brains. But the technology I want to talk to you about is language. We became phenotypically human about 2-ish million years ago. We looked like we do today. Probably less good hair or whatever, but pretty much looked the way we do today. And only 100 to 200,000 years ago, we quite suddenly learned language. It gave us a lot, right? We probably wouldn't have most of the things we consider the useful product of human society without language. But it brought with it a way of experiencing the world through a model. So we go about our days experiencing the world as a linguistic construct. Once you learn the word for a thing, you stop seeing the thing until you develop more expertise and learn more words for the thing, and then you start to see the thing in a more complicated way. What LSD does when we give it to people clinically is it turns off their filters of the world. So you hear a drug like that called the hallucinogen, right? But it doesn't really create hallucination. It turns off the visual organizing principles that you usually overlay on the world without noticing you're doing it. And so you start to see the world in a different way. It allows sensory crossover. So you might hear a color or taste a note, but it also turns off linguistic models. And I think that's where its power lies, is that you now, as a patient in one of our clinical trials, experience yourself and experience the world without the usual stories that you use to organize your experience of the world. The story you tell yourself about yourself is ego. That's you. That is yourself, is a story you tell yourself about yourself. And if that story is filled with sadness and regret, you might have depression. If it's filled with anticipatory anxiety about how things won't go well in the future, you probably have an anxiety disorder. People come back, put their filters back online, regain language, and are reorganized. They're differently organized, right? And they're better able to go out in the world and be the way they want to be. So the technology that is language comes with both the ability to create all of this, and neurotic illness, neuroses, right? It comes with problems in the story we tell ourselves. What's important here, and the reason I'm telling this story, is because when we build models, whether they're linguistic models or models of what healthcare is or what an individual specialty within healthcare is, we necessarily both create mistakes. The territory is not the map, right? So the models are wrong, even if they're useful. And we artificially draw edges. So there are things we take for granted in that model. All science has assumptions that surround it. And given a set of assumptions, a model is mostly true enough to be useful potentially. But when we ignore those boundaries and pretend like the model is true independent of that metastructure, the mistakes compound and the odds of the model being useful go down. So as we consider the interrelationship between science, technology, and policy, particularly when it comes to healthcare, we have to remember the metastructure. If we've been working in this healthcare system, as everybody has acknowledged today, trying to do the things we're talking about today, but the results keep getting worse, doesn't that suggest that the metastructure might be the problem? And so in a society with no social safety net, with a medicalized version of poverty, the inputs to what we call the healthcare system just keep getting worse, and the healthcare system has to try to accommodate that and make things work even as those inputs get worse. That's fundamentally not a technology problem, and it's not really a science problem. Despite all of that, we've come up with amazing innovations in medicine, right? Just in our short lifetimes, in our short times of participating in medicine, we've seen phenomenal advances in the science. But when the policy that surrounds it keeps making the inputs worse, the metrics will follow. And this is what is so important about DIME, and why I'm so proud to be involved with DIME and so proud to be involved with Jen for all these years, is that organizations that are incentivized to look beyond the current metastructure can actually make a difference, can actually change things. Because if you just draw a circle somewhere in what we call healthcare today and try to fix it, the inputs will prevent you from moving the things you want to move. And finally, Jen. When Jen was starting DIME, we were working together on a company called Health Mode, which was fundamentally based on improving measurement to make science better. And Jen said, why don't I do half time with Health Mode and half time starting DIME, so that, you know, salary and all, and health benefits. Though I don't think you ever needed my health benefits, did you? No. And of course, having worked with Jen on a bunch of things before this, I knew that halftime from Jen was going to be about 150% of anybody else in the world. So in Jen's current admirable response to her illness, when she called and said, hey, how about I step back? I said, well, if you want to, I guess you can. But I absolutely believe that you, at whatever percentage you can give, will do more for this organization and more for healthcare than anybody else.
Thank you, both for your tremendous insights, but also for your really kind words. And yet I think that you've shown that I have not done any of this by myself. I've had you shoulder to shoulder with me. I've had our amazing team. I've had all of you in this room. And whenever I'm having a hard day, I remind myself that I have so much privilege that even though I'm really sick, my hard days aren't a spot on what some people suffer, because some people can't access the care, or some people are caring for a child and they can't access that care. And so my situation is always going to be better. And so on the hard days, I think of every single one of you. And I appreciate the fact that you've all taken time with us today. I appreciate all of your partnership. And you know, what I have loved through the course of today is that no one's been intimidated to talk about the fact that, you know, Lisa, as you said, we might be on the precipice of some kind of earthquake moment. I think we talked to a lot of people, particularly CFOs at healthcare systems around the country, and they'll tell you that we are. And every single person has had the courage, not just to stand with me, but to also have a conversation about 2030 and be courageous in what we need to do to get there. And I love the fact that we spoke at detail with so many of you as we were putting our impact thesis together, and as we thought about things like prevention, personalization, a relentless focus on health outcomes, and a drive towards sustainability. I hope that that can offer some of the sorts of changes, Dan, that you sort of described. That is the new model. That is the new approach we need to have. That is the new lens. And I don't just appreciate each of you for today and for everything you've done before, but for everything we're going to do together over the next 5 years. We're going to have to do it together. We're going to have an enormous amount of courage, and we are going to have to be relentlessly focused on those 4 vehicles. So thank you, everyone. Dan, thank you for being with me today for closing remarks. And in very good news, though, I'm very sad to be as dry as a flip-flop right now. I am visualizing a gin and tonic that I'm not allowed. We do have a networking reception. So please join us. Alyssa, is it just across the hall? No, downstairs. Okay, this is why I'm not in charge. Terrific. So we'll go downstairs and we will just have a chance to sort of celebrate today and sort of compare notes on all of the ways that we want to collaborate going forward. Thank you, everyone.